Welcome back to the channel. How's everybody doing? Good to hear that. This time we have a really sticky, gooey dash on this Lexus IS250. You better put on some personal protective equipment and let's go. Now, of all the chemicals I have on my work van, the 99% isopropanol gets the call for this job. It seems to work the best where you have plasticizer migration that's been exacerbated by the sun beating down on the dash. In fact, we had the same problem with the AKG microphones. The wireless mics got sticky, and the rack mount receivers too. So a lot of people in the music business also know that alcohol is the choice for removing this. Do bear in mind, however, that for your particular job, you may want to also experiment with some different solvents to see which one works best. So now that we're finished with the test, I'm going to use the paper towel and a scuff pad both to take all of this off the dash that I can. Now that was a messy job, and there's no way I'm touching the camera with those gloves. Now, prior to the full cleaning, we took the A-pillar trim off of both sides. And you can see how that the scuff pad really did a nice job to finalize this. Whatever didn't come off certainly got smoothed back out using the scuff pad and the isopropanol. Now, this is still a bit sticky. It's not gummy, however, so we're ahead of the game. There was a little hole here, and I put a little epoxy in there while we're at it, since my hands were so messy already. And we feathered this with the Bondo spreader. We're not going to do any sanding here because we risk, if we did any sanding on this gummy dash, we risk pulling out material and causing a bigger hole than what we started with. So the plan here is to use our plastic primer as a base because, you know, the plastic primer dries kind of rigid, and so we'll have a really tough, like an armor coating on there with the plastic primer. We'll add our black pigment to that. We're going to have to add a good deal of flattener as well and some cross-linker. The plastic primer is already very shiny, almost as shiny as this dash is at the moment. So the flattener is to counteract the shininess in the plastic primer. Once the plastic primer is down, then we'll be safe for doing a little bit of light sanding. Now, some of the goo has gotten on the windshield, so I want to clean that now. Before we mask off the glass. That way we won't have to return to cleaning it down there after we've done all of our work. Now, I happen to have been gifted this plastic by Safelite, and what this is a protector for the dash for when they run the wire around to cut out the windshield. And each end has an angle cut that lets you fit this along the glass and along the A-pillar. So I've cut a piece of cardboard with the same two angles on either end, so I can do the same thing with that. That way you get a nice fit butted right up against that A-pillar. Now, you used to be able to see through that plastic, but that was a couple hundred dashes ago, I'm sure. Here, everything else is masked off. The instrument cluster, the center console, and also the glove box. And we're ready to paint. So here's the plastic primer with the black pigment. I'm going to be quite liberal in getting this. The thing to be careful with is to not use much pressure because it'll cause the turbulence up there against the glass. So just low pressure and high volume, and let that catapult right up into the crevice up there between the dash and the windshield. And the nice thing about these panels is you can remove them so easily, so now you have adequate light coming in to see what you're doing. So you saw we painted over some pretty big pieces of trash stuck into that dash. And so now we're going to use the 220 sandpaper to level all that stuff out. And we're not having a problem. The plastic primer is holding everything down, and we are safe in sanding with the 220. And as you can see, I elected to put just a little bit of epoxy in that hole that was kind of staring at the driver. And we'll mist a little color on top of the epoxy to bring that little spot up to speed. Now I thought my paint was still a little bit too shiny, so I've added a little bit more flattener to it on this go round. Now instead of aiming for just our final color, I'm making several passes here with low atomization so that I can put a texture. And I am going to cover the entire dash with this texture and just blend everything in. We'll blend all of the blemishes, those spots where I've put the epoxy in place, those will have texture also. And this will hide everything. Two things that hide everything: texture and flattener. They cover a multitude of sins. Now that I've got the texture dried here, I'm using 400 grit sandpaper because you want it to have a really nice feel. You don't want it to feel rough. It'll feel smooth because when you feel it, you'll be feeling across the tops of the texture. You still, however, will see the valleys of the texture. So that's the secret, just a light sanding with 400. And I also elected to put yet more flattener in my paint for the final application. Here's a little bit of alcohol just to clean the sanding dust. It kind of melts everything together too. Okay, so this is planning on being the very final color step. This is going to have a bit more air pressure, and I'm also going to be traveling faster, so we'll put less material down in one area. So just a finer atomization and moving it a little faster. We'll put a thin coat down, and with the thin coat down, then the flattener really has a chance to show off. And you'll see here when I use the hair dryer on it, see how it gets flat right away once it's dried back down. So the plan is then to put a couple coats of color. Any of the texture spots, individual drops of texture, would tend to be a little shinier because they were put on heavier. So just to make sure we have a uniform flatness, we want 2 or even maybe 3 very light coats on the final coating. And that'll let that flattener kick in there uniformly across the entire dash. We're going to blend down also a little further down the face of the dash, just so that we can blend the new with the old. And a little cleanup of some overspray on the start button. And we got some on the bezel right there. You didn't tell me that the masking tape came up there a little bit. That's all right, I got it. Now, a lot of times the A-pillar trim will be gooey from where it sat up against the dash originally. And just be careful getting it inserted that you don't accidentally rub it up against the edge of that dash where there still might be some stickiness to it. And then there's that little plastic piece that goes in there. I twist it with the needle nose pliers and get it into the groove. And then you can pound this home. Just a little bit of a tight operation up there. Everything snaps in place. And there's a little piece that snaps into the trim down below as well. All right, so this is the finished product. Just like brand old. So it'll be nice to do a little contrasting look here from where we started and how we finished. And that's the way, Oh, me too.